Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Captain Rex Witkamp, with the Ready, Set, Live podcast, where I focus a podcast on delivering the meaning of people's purpose. It's a purpose-driven podcast, which is focusing on having guests to talk about certain topics that are relevant to you, especially in these times. Really excited today. I have one of my great friends on as a guest today, just a man of such magnitude and drive that I'm honored to be in his presence and know him. My good friend, Corey Hooks, is with us today. Corey and I go way back through a paramedic program where we learned to become paramedics, and he's one of my brothers on the fire service as well. And I'm honored to have his greatness with us today, sharing on these topics. For those of my listeners that don't know Corey, why don't you just give a quick introduction to you? How you doing today? Thanks for having yourself on today.
I'm outstanding, man. Thanks for that great introduction. I was wondering for a minute who you were talking about, and I realized it was me. But if I describe myself, man, first of all, like, I'm a husband. Been married for 18 years, and I take a lot of pride in that. Especially considering, like, when I was born, my mom was 14 and my dad was 38. They were never married. I have a different last name than my father, so I took a lot of pride in getting married and, like, everybody in my house having the same last name and things like that. So I always say, first and foremost, I'm a husband and I'm a father. Former Marine, current firefighter. I did 8 years in the Corps as an M1A1 tank crewman, and now I'm a current firefighter and serial entrepreneur. So my wife and I, we own and operate a bounce house business here in Jacksonville, Florida, called Hooks Hoppers, where we rent out inflatables, bounce houses, combos, water slides, and tables, chairs, tents, and things for, like, backdoor cookouts and things like that. And then we also operate Hooks Enterprises, which I'm wearing one of our polos now, which is a landscape company. I don't cut grass necessarily. We don't do any maintenance anymore, but we do mulch, sod, flowers, palm tree trimming, pressure washing, and other accoutrements related to the landscaping that's not grass cutting. And my wife just got certified as a life coach, so she's getting her life coaching business off the ground. And then we also founded a company called A Better Five LLC, which is a education, it's like a financial literacy and like networking company. It's still in its infancy, but what we're trying to do with it is, because we didn't come from money, we weren't taught money. My grandmother couldn't teach me, my mom couldn't teach me what they didn't know. So we started this business sort of educate people that, like, not all debt is bad debt, and business creation, business ownership is sort of the way to go. Being able to set your own schedule and being rewarded for sort of how hard you work. We were both in the corporate field for a long time, and what we learned is, like, you show up, if you work for $12.50 an hour, you can show up and bust your hump. You're gonna get paid for $12.50 an hour, and another guy can show up and sort of scam and still get $12.50. So we just try to teach people where you're more rewarded if you own the company. Your hard work is paid off a little more based on how you work. So that's A Better Five. So we're Hooks Hoppers on Facebook and Instagram, Hooks Enterprises on Facebook, and then the A Better Five group on Facebook as well.
Wow, that is a lot. And you know what? For people that think they're busy all the time, just take a look at Corey and his family's life and how busy they are. But they're busy doing the things that matter and not just being busy counting the things that they're doing. And so that's amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction, Corey. I'm going to go over just the quick show notes on the topics of the day. We're in a challenging time, as everybody knows, and these 5 tenets is what I call this topic, the 5 tenets. A tenet's definition is a core belief or a value that is regarded as true, held by either a company or an individual or an organization. So if we relate these core tenets to how people can look at their own efforts in life for achieving the results that they want to attain, these core tenets are especially important right now. We're talking about how to rise above mediocrity. We're talking about elevating a person's standards. We're talking about how to visualize the best version of ourselves. And we're also talking about taking action on that visualization, and that's living up to our highest potential. And once we've found that we're taking action on our potential, we go ahead and move into giving purpose for our potential. And those are the 5 tenets. So, just from the top, Corey, as a serial entrepreneur and businessman and just a man that is just getting it. I mean, getting it day after day with the grind. You understand the hustle. Why is it important for people to realize, for them to rise above mediocrity, especially right now?
It's funny because I'm a big Grant Cardone fan. He's a real estate guy, motivational speaker, sales trainer, everything. And I read one of his books. Well, I read a couple of his books. One of them was Be Obsessed or Be Average. And he just talks about basically like average doesn't necessarily get you anything. You have to be exceptional. You don't know the name of, the most average basketball player. You know the greats, the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the LeBron James, because they, were great. He said, be great, nothing else pays. And I've always sort of adhered to that. And, bringing it back to our business, to my businesses, I'm very proud of my work. In all avenues. And so like, we're not the cheapest bounce house business in Jacksonville. We're not the cheapest landscape crew in Jacksonville, but because we do certain things well or better than others, we can command the price that we charge. And it's so funny because, you mentioned mediocrity, and so many people are mediocre at business. Oftentimes you get praised just for doing what most people see is basic business, because so many people are mediocre. I had one quick story. I had a lady, I was running 15 minutes late. I knew I was going to be late because my pressure washer was out of gas. I thought I remember putting gas in it, but it was actually the generator. So I'm in the middle of a pressure washing job and I had to stop to go get gas, which my time didn't account for. So I knew I was going to be a little bit behind the time it took me to go get the gas and come back. So I was about 15 minutes. And so it's like 1 o'clock. I'm supposed to be late at 3, but I know that 15 minutes threw me off 15 minutes. So I text her at 1 and says, hey, it's going to be closer to about 3:15 instead of 3. And so I met her at the house. We walked around. I gave her a quote. She said, great. I'd love to have you do it. Put me on your schedule as soon as you can. She said, also, I appreciate you giving me that heads up. She said, a lot of people don't value other people's time. I was able to stay at my office for 15 more minutes and get 15 more minutes of work done, as opposed to being here at 3 o'clock and waiting on you who's running 15 minutes behind. She said, a lot of people don't see 15 minutes as late, so they wouldn't even bother to call. And so that's sort of difference between being just a regular, what we would term mediocre business person, and just doing something what I thought was common knowledge, but apparently people don't do that because she saw that as something extra.
I think that's a great point, and you've definitely spoke to a lot of listeners who can relate that if you have something else to be doing, you don't want to wait for someone else who doesn't give you the courtesy of that common business. It should be common business practice, but there again, you're pointing out being above a level of mediocrity, and that commanded that client to return business towards you over and over. So, be obsessed or be average. And the only way to get out of mediocrity is to shoot for excellence, which is a quote by Eric Thomas, who is another motivational speaker. And a lady named Colleen Hoover also said that a life of mediocrity is a waste of life. So be obsessed or be average, as Grant Cardone says. And, where you find yourself taking actions on your business, do that extra value step, and you're going to command a little more attention from your client. So that's a great point. Moving forwards, I want to go right into, because we're talking about rising above, and rising is an action, and it's an elevation, if you will. And so elevating a person's standards personally, if people want to look at this instead of their business or instead of their career efforts, what about personally looking within for the person to be a better person? Why is it important to elevate their own standards?
I think they both sort of tie in. I tell people all the time, like, it's weird. People say, man, you win everything you play. And I tell them all the time, I only play what I can win. You know what I mean? Nobody likes to lose. And part of the reason, like, if you ask my friends who their best friend is, a lot of them are going to say me. You ask my wife who's the best husband, she's going to say me. You ask now granted, they don't know all husbands, they don't know all wives, but I tell people all the time, like, I see all of life as sort of a competition, whether other people know we're playing or not. So I'm going to always try to make my wife feel like she's the best wife ever, or I'm the best husband ever. I'm trying to make my kids feel like a certain way. That's just how I do it. And it helps every aspect of your life when you sort of live that way. You don't want somebody, treating one of your customers better. You don't want, somebody, your wife feel like, man, I'd rather be her because, her husband pays attention. Like, that's sort of how I do it. My standards are like insane. And I tell people all the time, you know, everything is doable. Everything, I always use the term figure outable. You know, you can figure it out. So, you know, you make these lofty goals, but they're obtainable. You know, you want to lose weight. I just tell people, you know, do 1,000 sit-ups a night. You want your abs back. Well, I can do 1,000 sit-ups a day. I'm not saying that once, but if you're sitting down watching 3 hours worth of TV, do 20 sit-ups every commercial break, or every commercial, do 20 sit-ups. It's 4 commercials per commercial break, 4 commercial break. You know, next thing you know, you've done 500 in a 3-hour period, and it's a start, you know? And so that's sort of where I am on that. Just, you know, yeah, you have to want more like for yourself than other people want for you.
Exactly. And that's where the standards are raised within a person. And I never apologize for raising my standards, because if they understand, when you raise your standards, the universe will rise up to meet you there. And then if you start lowering your standards, you never want to do that, to meet and fit other people. And so that's a good answer there that you said, because if someone looks at raising their standards as some unmanageable task, you gave a specific action point to that, and you said break it down in chunks. If you can't do it all 1,000 sit-ups in once, break it down into little manageable chunks. And you know, pretty soon maybe the standard of doing having better abs for somebody is going to outweigh the necessity for watching so much television. So I know that rings true with some of us. So I appreciate that answer very much. Now, this next one I think is a great, it's an important kind of segue into the fourth. And this is, if you have to visualize the best version of yourself, if you want to be the best version of yourself, you have to be able to visualize it. And I tell people a lot of things that are, everything in existence came from the visualization out of somebody's imagination, their mind. Everything started as an idea. And so if we put that as a goal in the end, I think that this is where we can start on this topic. Why don't you tell us about how this can be an effective technique for people to get to where they want to be? Visualizing the best versions of it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you have to, man. You have to. It's funny. I grew up down the street from this guy. He was almost like we called him pseudo uncle, but he was just really like a neighbor. But again, I grew up with just my grandmother. You know, my dad was around, but not like in the household. He was there if I called, but wasn't there every day. And so I would always go down to this guy's house. And it's funny because he as you walk out of his door, there was a picture inside a frame, like a huge, probably 16 by 20. And it was just a stack of money. And there was like a sticky note that said like $281,615.18, just some random number, like down to the cents. And I'm like, is that how much money that is? He's like, no, that's what I need to, you know, sort of be where I want to be, you know, to accomplish the goals he wanted to accomplish. That was sort of his goal. And he said, every day before I walk at the house, I look at that and I was like, man, that's deep. And it's so funny because everybody's now has gotten on these vision boards where they get together and they cut out things from magazines. This is the car I want. This is the house I want. This is the career I want. And I think that is very helpful because you do need to visualize sort of where you want to be. And I do that a lot, man. Like before I bought my trailer, I would just look at trailers, Photoshop my logo on the trailer. And I went and bought a trailer. I visualized the truck, you know, go to the way. And you have to sort of see these things before they happen. You almost help to manifest them.
That's awesome. And vision boards are a great idea for those of my listeners and those of the watchers on this podcast. If you have some goal in mind and you haven't taken the steps to visualize and put your visualizations down on some sort of a vision board, you're shorting yourself. You need to be able to visualize and see tangibly what it is. So then your mind will start to create steps and pathways towards meeting that end. And, you know, I've heard a quote that says that you're more productive doing 15 minutes of visualization than from 16 hours of hard labor. Some people want to trade that time for money. Other people want to take that investment in their mind and get to the visualization because that's a faster process for a means to an end. And if we're all struggling to get by in today's world, today's economy, today's situation, you know, we can visualize the end of this. This has not come to stay. It will pass. It's just a matter of if and when that this situation will change. So the appropriate time to start taking action visually is now, because if you can see what it is that you want in your mind, you will create that pathway automatically. We can get there from here. So that's a great answer from you, and I appreciate that. And there's always some person in our lives that has influence on that. And for you, it was the gentleman down the street who had that board, that money board, and that's a great visualization that he was using, and it had an effect on you. So thanks for sharing that with our listeners today. We want to talk about once people, this is the next step, okay? Once they have a visualization of where they want to be, it's time to take the action and actually live up to their highest potential. I want you to speak to this, if you could, with our listeners.
Yeah. So yeah, and this is something that I try to do with a better five. Cause I'm like not an excuse guy in the slightest means. Again, my mother was 14. My dad was 38, never lived together. But they were never married. They didn't live together as far as I remember. You look at statistics, kids having kids, generally the kid doesn't amount to be anything, but I try to tell people all the time, it has to be in the person. My mom was on drugs when I was a kid. And she speaks on that. So it's not like I'm letting family secrets out. But because of that, I've never used any like illegal drug. I barely take like Advil, bro. Ibuprofen, but yeah, never smoked weed and never did any cocaine, nothing, because I saw what it did. And I'm a bit of a control freak, and I don't like being in control. I probably can name how many times I've been like uncontrolled, like drunk to the point where I was not in control of what was going on one hand, but definitely never done any hard. So it's just, I try to tell people, like, I wanted more for myself, and I didn't want to be the statistic. I wanted to be more of the anomaly. So I didn't want to, like, my highest potential for me was like anything. I didn't want this kid to feel like he had a better chance to amount to something because he came from a 2-parent household. I wanted to say, hey, we're actually equal, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily how you were brought up. It's what's in you. And I believe that wholeheartedly, because again, most, kids that are born to a 14-year-old, end up doing something other than what I'm doing right now.
That's an amazing history and story. Thanks for sharing that. And, at the end of the day, what is it that you did? And I'll tell you, you put effort on you, and you realize that the change, it has to be what happens. It doesn't matter what happens outside. It's what happens within a person. And that's what you saw early on. And you decided to take effort on you, Corey. And, Winston Churchill said, continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential. You realized that you had a potential, you visualized it, and then you put effort on you. It was an active process. It didn't come automatically. Nobody hands you success. Nobody hands you anything. And the world owes us nothing, but we must realize that we all have the greatness within us, and we owe the world everything for pursuing and fulfilling and living up to our highest potential. So that's amazing. I know you're going to resonate with a lot of my listeners, and we're going to just round it out here with the final chapter of what I call the 5 tenets. And this is the 5th chapter, and why it's important that once you've found a visualization for what you could become, and once you've taken action to live up to your highest potential, then we have a lot of potential energy, right? We have a lot of pent up meaning, but we need to find specific purpose for that potential. And I want you to speak on that. Can you give our listeners something for why it's important to give purpose for their potential, what it is that they have to give to offer the world?
Right. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do with a better 5. So like what happened was, when Mike Vick got in trouble for dogfighting, everybody around me, because he started spending so much money on lawyer fees, and his house ended up getting repossessed. And up to that point, Mike Vick had made like $100 million in salary, not to mention endorsements. And everybody around me was like, man, I wonder why he had a mortgage on that house. Because again, growing up poor, I was taught save up, pay cash, interest is the devil, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody around was like, man, why would he have a mortgage on that house? He's made over $100 million. Why wouldn't he have just paid cash for it like we were all taught? And so, everybody wondered it. I went and found out why, so you started researching, and you realize, like, if the interest you're being charged is less than the interest you're being paid, you borrow every single time. And so you start to see that happening everywhere. Jerry Jones, $6 billion net worth, building $2 billion stadium, and he borrows $1 billion half, or borrows $1 billion and uses $1 billion of his own. And it's just like, why are these billionaires borrowing? So long story short, basically what I'm trying to do with A Better Five is twofold. I'm trying to show people, one, that your circumstances don't have to define you. And I try to be like the walking proof of that. Again, I grew up around people that sold drugs. I've never sold drugs. I grew up around people that use drugs. I never used drugs. And so, you don't necessarily, you're not committed to a certain life because of the side of town you grew up in, the housing projects you were raised in, the fact that your mom was on drugs, or the fact that your parents were never married. You're not tied to a certain outcome because of that. And then, like I say, again, I'm trying to teach more people, and not this is not a black white thing. This is poor. You're poor white, you're poor black. I'm trying to teach you how to understand money, and realizing that it doesn't take much to start a business. Now, you want to start a business that rents jets, you need a couple of jets. It's going to cost you a lot, but you could save a tax return and go buy your first vending machine, and you've got a vending machine business. So I'm just trying to teach people that you can overcome your circumstances, and you can have whatever it is you want. Once you visualize it, once you rise above the mediocrity, once you use the 5 tenets, you could have, sort of whatever it is you want. You just, got to outwork the next guy.
It's so amazing that you mentioned that, and it's true. It's an active process. See how this book ends, and it goes right through those steps. And people, when they begin to rise above their mediocrity, and because there's mediocrity everywhere, there's pigeons and there's chickens everywhere. But if you want to be an eagle, you have to rise above and have that eagle mentality, or a lion in the jungle, right? And the creator himself has only identified himself with 2 animals, and that's the eagle and the lion. And so if you want to be one of the 2, you have to understand that you have greatness within, and it's just a matter of getting there through this process of elevating your standards. Demand more from yourself of what you expect than what you're currently expecting out of yourself, and never be satisfied. They've said that you must do what you can from where you're at with what you've got, and never be satisfied. And so it's that restless spirit. All entrepreneurs have it. They have that restless spirit. They never want to give up. They have a can-do attitude, and they never quit. And but a lot of people are walking around with this humdrum look on their face, and they're lost in life, and they're lost. And they have no direction. They have no visualization. They have no more. People don't dream anymore. They have no imagination, and they want to be told, listen, go through these tenets, go through this process, visualize where you want to be. It just takes time. People are a loss in their lives because they don't stop and think. Think about where you could be. Think about what your situation is now and where you want to be, and then just start mapping out your roadmap to get there, and then just demand more for yourself, and you'll actively start living a higher potential, and then giving purpose for that potential. Now, what you mentioned, Corey, let's just double back to this real quick. You said your situation and your circumstances do not define you. I know that right now is a very, very tough time for everybody. Speak just a minute on that topic, because everybody's in this situation of coronavirus. 50 million people are out of work. People are getting laid off left and right. People are getting evicted. And this is a bad circumstance that people can look at for anybody. They want to round it out with a quote. So tell me what your thoughts are on how this situation, it shouldn't define a person.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just listening to a podcast, and they said that like a lot of these big businesses were created in a recession. And it is just, you have to be able to sort of pivot. One of the things we teach with A Better Five is like multiple revenue streams. So like if I just depended on bounce houses, I would have been in trouble, because my bounce house revenue declined greatly because nobody was having parties. Nobody wanted to be in a bounce house, and they don't know where it came from. No matter how well you said you cleaned it, they didn't know where it was rented the weekend before. So that, declined greatly. And for a minute, the landscaping dropped off because people were home, and it was like, man, I'll just spread this mulch myself. Luckily, I, live in Florida, and it's 110 degrees. So it's not just something, if you don't do regularly, you don't just jump into it and say, hey, I'm going to spread 10 yards of mulch on my own. And so a lot of them end up calling me back. But the big thing is you have to be able to pivot. So I got a guy that I buy a lot of my suits and shirts from. He works at Joseph A. Bank. Joseph A. Bank was closed, but on the side, he made he would turn neckties into bow ties. So he knew how to sew. This dude made, I don't even want to put the numbers out there, but it was enough money to get him by starting to make masks instead of bow ties. So because he knew how to sew, he would go to Joann's Fabrics, buy elastic, and he took a couple of my Hooks Hoppers cooling towels and made them into Hooks Hoppers masks. He was taking just anything he could find. He made Janelle one he couldn't find Hello Kitty, so he made Janelle a black and a polka dot pink and white when he made, my son one with like Iron Man and Spider-Man, like Avengers one, and then he made my oldest son one with music notes. He was charging like $10 a pop. And obviously, he's marking it up. So he was making decent money. I don't know what his markup was, but I know that got him by while the store was closed. So you have to be able to pivot. There's work out there. If you can find it, for every industry that was affected negatively, there's one that was affected positively. I was just talking with a guy yesterday. I don't forget where I was, but we were walking through a store and I said, you know who really made out? The sign guys, because there are signs everywhere, which direction to walk down the aisle. Hey, we have curbside carry out now. Hey, make sure you have a mask if you come in here. They're like, signs are
masks, yeah, everywhere.
So yeah, for every industry that was affected in a negative fashion, there was another one that was affected in sort of a positive fashion. So you just have to be able to pivot and go find out where you need it. And sometimes you have to put your pride aside. I worked at a plant nursery for a while, and I had never done an outside job up until that point, but I was in a situation where a beggar couldn't be a chooser. So I started slinging plants as best as I could and ended up being the manager before they closed up, the yard manager. Again, you got to take any situation and make the best of it.
Absolutely. And, that's great. I guess the word and the drawback, the takeaway from that is that the flexibility, exactly that, the pivot point. This is a time in our lives that Peter Drucker referred to as the 3 C's. It's overwhelming complexity, increased change, and an increased level of an overwhelming competition. So with these things going on now, it's no time to stay planted and do the same thing you're doing. You have to evolve to where the situation is demanding a change in flexibility and in pivot, especially for business. But I tell you, there's no successful business without a successful leader, and the leadership comes from within. You have to lead yourself. There's an old African proverb that says, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm. And that's how we have to look at ourselves when we manage and navigate this new landscape that we're in. So, Corey, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy go-getter guy, just like me. It's been an honor to be in your presence and having this conversation today. I want to remind our listeners, go to follow Corey Hooks and all of his channels and all of his efforts. Stay tuned. I'm going to put out some stuff on my media channels as well in regards to his program, because the last chance that we were trying to get on to work together, Corey, was for your efforts on the debt. What were you doing?
The mindset reset.
Yeah, and sort of a mindset thing there that is going to go work well. So we're going to talk offline about that. So stay tuned for some information coming out about that. But thanks for everyone for listening. If you're in your car, if you're on your iPod, your iPhone, or wherever on the digital radio waves, jump in and take hold of these tenets, start to apply them in your lives. I guarantee you, from me personally, and from my guests, I'm always having an honor to have my guests on. And I learned so much from all of my guests. I want to thank all of them personally, but you're going to have a massive, you're going to come to a point in your life where things are going to change. And if you make a decision to decide, that is the decision point that's necessary to make a change in your life. But remember that if you don't decide, that is still a decision. And so since we're talking about that, life, I'm reminding you, life is not found between these isms and the schisms of life. You have to quit what I call the paralysis of analysis. You have to jump in with both feet and go all in on your dreams. And then when you couple your purpose with your potential that you have within you, the universe will unfold for you. And this comes with a strict warning. Assuredly, all dreams will be tested for authenticity. And so when you got to get clear on your goals and clear on your dreams, you will be tested. But there's no testimony without a testament, no testimony without a test first. So what you're going through now will be setting you up for the future. And like Corey said, you're not defined by these circumstances. You have to be like the quote. People are always complaining about their circumstances, about for what they are in life. And I don't believe in circumstances. The people that get on in this world are the people that look for the circumstances that they want. And if they don't find them, they create them. And you and I, my friend, are creators, and we're going to drag more people up to us, to our level. And the people that are coming along are going to be pushed further, and we're going to help them up. And the people that can't get along are going to leave, and they're going to be disposed and fade away into the obscurity of living a life of mediocrity. And that's where they're going to stay until they make that change. So Corey, thanks again for your time today. I appreciate you, brother. Have a great rest of your day.
Hey,
we're going to talk soon. I appreciate it.
You as well.
Thank you, sir. I'll talk soon.
Yes, sir.